EdTech Monday Kenya is brought to you by the Mastercard Foundation's Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT and EdTech East Africa.
Hello and welcome to EdTech Monday Kenya, a series of monthly conversations enabled by the Mastercard Foundation. My name is Joy Doreen Bira, and this month we focus on tech for ed, or early development. Is it ever too early? Now, the future of any country's development begins with children and early childhood development, commonly abbreviated as ECD. In Kenya, the responsibility to deliver quality early childhood development services is devolved to the 47 counties, with each county tasked with designing, planning, funding, and delivering these services. There are over 10.9 million children under the age of 8 in Kenya, and the definition of ECD for counties targets children aged 0 to 5, who are about 6.7 million countrywide. And the last few years have seen an accelerated push to incorporate technology into education to drive greater learning outcomes. How can technology help foster literacy and numeracy skills and lay a strong foundation for learning today? Our theme this month is Tech for Ed. Is it ever too early, and how can we build a foundation for ECD in Kenya using EdTech? Our brilliant panelists are Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, Executive Director and Board Secretary, Usawa Agenda, and has led the Uwezo program conducting citizen-led assessment of learning in Kenya and conducts broad-based research to unearth underlying issues that impact equity in education. Susan Ntana, Senior Manager, Support Center at Kidogo, a social enterprise that improves access to quality, affordable, early childhood care and education in East Africa's low-income communities. We also have Jesse Soleil, President and co-founder Akili Network, and he's got extensive creative experience designing video games, developing interactive toys, and co-creating TV shows and developing original IP that works across platforms. Our sign language interpreter is none other than Rose Omolo. Lady and gentlemen, it's great to have you on the show, and it's such an honor having you on EdTech Monday Kenya this month. I'm going to start with Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa. Of course, knowing that you are a research farm and you do many other things in addition to research, but tell us about the state of early learning, or in this case, early childhood development in Kenya.
Thank you, Doreen, for having me. In short, we have inequitable learning outcomes. We have low and inequitable learning outcomes. The last assessment that we did, revealed that we have only, because we carried this out targeting children in the CBC, and only 4 in 10 children were able to meet or exceed expectations, meaning that the other 6 are all below expectation, and that means that we have a challenge in terms of ensuring that early years learning is actually delivering on the promise that we are giving to these children. Right.
And so you would assess the current state of early learning as being underperforming?
Yes.
Underperforming?
Underperforming, because if you have 4 in 10 children meeting or exceeding expectation, then we are underperforming. And that throws a challenge to us and to the entire education sector to try and figure out how best to get us back on track, to make sure that early learning years are delivering value to the children who are going through that process.
All right, Susan, if we're underperforming when it comes to early childhood development, or early learning in this case, what are some of the barriers to creating a quality early learning experience for young children from your perspective?
Okay, thank you, Doreen. I'll say the biggest challenge is more of the teacher to child ratio, because you find like the best practice at least advocates to 1:8, but you can imagine in Kenyan classrooms or even the early learning centers, the number of children attended to by one teacher. So there is the biggest one I can think of. And also, let's just say quality early learning needs to be subsidized, because it is expensive to offer quality. So if we can bridge that gap, then I believe that we will achieve quality outcomes.
Okay. Jesse, early learners, if we're going to categorize them, are pretty much children between the ages of 0 and 5, let's say. And most of them spend their time outside the classroom. But is there a way that technology can help to transform these spaces they're always in and interact with into spaces for early learning? And how can technology do that?
Thanks for the question, and thanks for having me, Joy. One of the things that I believe early childhood programming lacks is a focus on play. And in order for a younger child to learn, it is not really a direct instruction problem. It is an acceptance and awareness problem. And so what I mean by that is when you spend time with a child playing with triangles, at the end of that, they will understand that that shape is a triangle. But to show someone a triangle and to expect that they'll retain that, and that retention is where we measure their success, is oftentimes considerably off the mark. So by integrating play with learning, I think we have a much better opportunity to address early childhood development opportunities.
How early is too early, or is it ever too early?
Well, you have to remember that children develop at whatever their rate is. So some children can understand and retain information at a level when others cannot. So it's really hard to assess whether or not a child who isn't reading at 4 is actually deficient. That switch may not have flipped yet. But in the case of my sister, for example, who's brilliant, she didn't read till she was 6. So to measure her ability to read against her future, the probability of her success would have been unfair. And so I think, how early is too early? Well, it's never too early to play with a child and to give them experience with the world. And to understand what that outcome of that play might be is actually, as we heard earlier, it's actually quite difficult and expensive to find people who understand what that means.
Right. Okay. And probably the next question should go to each and every one of us. The benefits of introducing technology to learners at a younger age. What are some of those? If I will start with Emmanuel.
Thank you. And before I answer this question, allow me to just comment on what Jesse said. Younger children learn through experience, much more than lecture. And telling them this is that, they need to experience playing with things and learning, and then asking questions and being told this is that and this is what it does through experience. I think that is very critical. EdTech is now a way of life. For most of us, we are moving into the information age. Literacy is becoming synonymous to digital literacy. If you are digitally literate, you are functionally literate. So it is important that we allow our children to start to learn, to experience playing with EdTech and learning through EdTech as early as they can.
Even when we know that there are inequalities. So how do we make this happen?
We have had inequalities for a long time. And the problem today with EdTech is that it has potential to exacerbate those inequalities if we don't facilitate those who have been generally marginalized to get on board in the use of EdTech, which is why I think that it is up to all of us in the sector and the government and other actors to figure out the most creative ways that will include children who have been generally excluded in the past to take part into this EdTech revolution, so that they are not, it doesn't actually marginalize them further as it has been the case in the past.
Okay. Looking at those benefits that Emmanuel has talked about, are there challenges that need to be looked out for when it comes to introducing technology to early learners?
Yes, and I'll say you find like sometimes children, it can affect their social, emotional functions, because I'll be like, provided I can see Akili kids playing on TV, I dance with Akili, I might feel like I don't need maybe to play with other siblings. So I'll say in as much as we'll be encouraging them to EdTech, like for any digital literacy program, let's also ensure there is the bit of play, or the physical play, the physical interactions with other children, because they are a community and they need to know that I can't grow in isolation. Yes.
Okay, I can't grow in isolation. That's important. But Jessie, you know, you are a Kili. That's where people spend most of their time, or at least children spend most of their time. Motor skills need to be developed, vis-a-vis technology skills need to be developed. How do we achieve both of them? Is there like a way to get a win-win on both ends?
Well, from a gross motor skills perspective, that's not going to help you with holding your iPad. That's get outside, run around, kick a ball, play with mom, roll chapati, right? Those are things that children should be involved in. And from a fine motor skills perspective, yes, being able to touch something, whether it's a computer, move a mouse around, put a finger on an iPad, whatever those things are, even use a remote with the television, those should all be encouraged as well. But here's the thing, I think the point of trying to figure out where we invest in time and energy oftentimes is misplaced when you put so much energy, so much training into teachers at the university level. When you plant a seed and you take care of it, you want it to grow, you watch it every day, you give it a little water, you give it maybe some fertilizer, you help it and you watch it. You don't take care of the tree as much when it's grown. And so if you imagine that same thing, what are the things that we need to do to help kids get engaged with technology, but also in a meaningful way that is, as Confucius said, everything in moderation, including moderation. Sometimes it's okay to watch all day, and sometimes you need to get the heck out and play. Sometimes you need to get your hands in the flour and the water and the dirt and the mud, and that is important. So to minimize those moments is actually to do our children a disservice.
Are early childhood educators well trained on leveraging technology to help early learners build foundational skills? And I think, Susan, you interact a lot with the educators and the children as well. What is your view on this?
Okay, I'll say let's look at it from the different contexts. So if you talk about early learning, mostly in maybe public schools or private schools, you find like at least they have the minimum ECD requirement. And right now, as we're embracing technology, maybe they've been trained on some bit of digital literacy programs. But think about the low-income communities. I'm talking about this because this is the context we are working with. So you may find like, first of all, maybe somebody might not be having the required skills needed, and in this case also now introducing the digital bit of it. So I'll say we still need to do much in order to ensure that we bridge the inequalities. And in that case, I think maybe from a recent the CBC introduction, you find like lots of parents were complaining, and even some of the teachers, they felt like it's time for me to leave this teaching profession because it's demanding a lot. So in this case, as we also want to introduce the technology, because that is the future. So we just need to see how best we can integrate it, maybe find a way of maybe bringing it into the curriculum slowly, but with the midterm goals, just to ensure that it's effective in the long run.
Right. Emmanuel, your research shows that 7 counties that have the highest percentage of out-of-school learners, including those at the early ages or at the early years, are from arid and semi-arid lands. How can technology be brought to them, considering their areas, and you probably highlighted on this earlier, but how might technology help to close the gap for early learners in these hard-to-reach areas, like Turkana, like Marsabit and Garrison and the like?
So 3 things are responsible for these children being out of school. For many of them, schools are far, and so when you're 4 years, you cannot be able to walk to school. There is no efficient, safe way to get to school, so you delay to get into PPE until you are 6 or 7 years, contrary to the national policy on when a child should be in PP1 and PP2. So technology can actually help to make sure that these children can access some level of learning without necessarily walking the distance that is insecure to cover, and it's also long. However, there is need for the policy framework to support actors in this space. I have spoken to Safaricom in the past, and they have told me, why doesn't government, for example, provide that if we provide free internet to a school or to a community in the country, then we will get a tax rebate on the cost of providing that free internet.
Okay, and Jesse, you know, I know you wanted to complement what Susan was saying, but have we developed localized content that is suitable for early learners? I've watched Akili Kids like on a number of occasions, and I can see that, you know, my kids are interested in that content, but are all kids interested in all of that content? And what more needs to be done to ensure that quality localized content is available, readily available for children in the early years?
I think one of the biggest challenges is that it is expensive and time consuming to create any kind of product for kids. So what we have tried to do with, at least from a television perspective, is produce as fast as we can with the funds that we get, which are not enormous or unlimited, so that we can continue to build and create great content on the channel.
Emmanuel, let me come back to you real quick. The responsibility to deliver quality ECD services is meant to be devolved across our 47 counties. At least that is what it should be. But from a policy perspective, there's more attention that's being paid to children maybe over the age of 8 and less attention to children below the age of 8. How do we ensure that our policies are realigned, or what would work best? What would be the best practice to help children below the age of 8?
First, I think that we need even to go back to the Constitution and ask ourselves, is it proper to tell county governments to employ early childhood teachers? I think that all teachers across the education sector should be employed by the Teacher Service Commission. And we should devolve infrastructure even for primary school to the counties so that they can build brick and mortar, and we can have national government making policy and deploying and remunerating and motivating teachers for uniformity across the country. As it is right now, a lot of counties have built very nice infrastructure for ECDs. In fact, now we have a problem that in some counties, children don't want to transit to grade 1 because the infrastructure for early learning is much better than what they will find in grade 1. We need to harmonize that, I think.
Technology, of course, is the ultimate thing. Just like children learn to speak, now technology is the thing that everyone needs to be able to achieve their full self-actualization to a certain degree. But how do we ensure there's school readiness for this? Because it's different when children are being homeschooled as opposed to when they're going to school. How can technology play that role in fostering school readiness? Let me start with Jesse.
So there's different parts to school readiness. One part of school readiness is having sight letter and number and word recognition. So when the teacher points to an A, they recognize that that's an A. Or this word is how, and you can say how. So that's the academic part of school readiness. But the part of school readiness we don't talk about, that actually we were talking about earlier, is how do you help kids understand that it's not a good idea to bite your friends? Or that sharing, we always say sharing is caring, but really how to share, how to be friendly, how to build community with peers. Those are not necessarily subjects that are taught in school, even when they get to school. So it's lovely to hear that children may want to stay in some of that pre-primary activity where that's acceptable behavior. Whereas when you move into something more structured, maybe it's less fun, because now you're being measured on different academic values instead of the social values. So how do we include both of those together? I don't have an answer, but I think the best part is if you understand that social values are important as academic values, that at least as you build strategies to address them and continue on into formal education, that you have a better foundation for seeing whether or not someone has the integrity, is being integrated into those programs accurately.
All right. Susan?
It's time we encourage learning to begin at home, because you find the parent is the first teacher. So how do we engage the parent in a way that they can engage the child to ensure there is school readiness? So in this case, can we have maybe some education to parents, telling them about responsive caregiving, positive discipline? This is how you need to, if maybe children are playing, maybe how can the child relate with another in a good way? So you find like those are the social values that we can pass on to them, and it needs to begin at home. So parental engagement is key. And I'll say, like, for example, during COVID period, while learners were at home and schools were closed, you find some parents were asking, like, how do I engage this child? Because to them, they know learning is for them, for the teacher to take the child through learning. And we had some radio programs just creating that awareness, like this is how you can relate with the child. For example, we also opened an Ask ECD Expert SMS hotline, whereby somebody could just share a question and we could address that, because you find like parents are really willing to interact with these kids, but they don't know how, they just don't know how. So if we can build that block of parental engagement for them to understand how to carry out how to build the early years of a child, because we say the first 1,000 days are the most important, and it builds up from there. So if we can support in terms of information and then passing on knowledge to parents, then I believe school readiness won't be a challenge per se.
Okay. All right. I like that. And now, as we bring this to a close, for EdTech to succeed at the early childhood development level, what would your recommendations be? Because you all come from different backgrounds. Jesse is a developer of content and many other things. And Susan, deals with local communities. And Emmanuel here does a lot of research that informs how countries should move forward in terms of the different levels of education. So for EdTech to succeed, what would you recommend?
I would say policy and investment and targeted investment. Kenya has implemented an ICTs in education policy for the last, from 2008. So, but there has been very non-structured way in which we invest in implementing this policy. We have put resources in supplying digital devices, for example, into schools, without preparing teachers to utilize those devices in teaching and learning. So we need to structure the policy, streamline the policy, make sure that the policy does not have gaps in it. Our current policy has a lot of gaps in it, with a lot of emphasis on devices rather than the teacher, who is most critical. We need to structure that. We need to structure investment and make sure it is targeted properly. And third, we need to actually look at the issue of equity, because if we continue on the path we are on, we are going to marginalize much more numbers of children than we have already done.
Right. Susan?
Okay, I'll talk about now that it is devolved, mostly the 0 to 5. So can we find a way of coming together, maybe through the Council of Governors or whichever body and partners, and just to...
There's an ECD network in the country.
Yes, there is the ECD network, and the other, like bringing all thought partners into the process.
All right. Jesse?
I want to underscore, well, both of my colleagues, but Emmanuel, I think the point that you were making about ensuring that we're not creating a problem of equitability, that all kids should get access to the types of products and programs that are meant for them. That's what we're trying to do with Akili Kids. But I think also, how do we move beyond just broadcasting and creating moments where, yes, there's a value in play, and I just have to say that it's really, really hard to measure a child's success at this age because everyone develops differently and they all develop different skills. So I think if there was a moment where we could say, let's just really focus our energy on building great experiences for kids and throw away this idea of trying to measure the success or the probability of their success, I think we'll do way better. And it does come down to what you can do at home with your children.
Absolutely. All right. And Emmanuel, you are coming up with a report, I think, that's meant to be released at the end of the month on early childhood development.
Yes, we carried out a survey. We did a mapping of the ECD actors in Nairobi and carried out an assessment of whole child development indicators within the school, the home, and looking at the children characteristics across the entire county, and we are expecting to release that report on the 29th of this month.
All right. And you can find that report on the usawaagenda.org website when it is finally released. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for making time for the show this month, and to our sign language interpreter as well, Rosa Molo, who has made sure everyone is included. You can find this and all other shows of EdTech Monday on the MasterCard Foundation YouTube channel, and you can follow the conversation as well on the Young Africa Works Facebook page. My name is Joy Doreen Bira. Thank you all for watching, and until the next one, do take care. Bye-bye for now.
EdTech Monday Kenya was brought to you by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in ICT and EdTech East Africa.